Admiral Jake Morrison sat in his office on Luna Base, watching Earth rise over the moon's horizon like a blue marble against the black of space. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed. The message that arrived this morning had changed everything. The transmission came from the deepest parts of known space, carried by quantum relay systems that cost more than entire planetary budgets to maintain. It bore the official seal of the Galactic Senate, an organization that had governed most of the galaxy for over 3,000 years. The message was simple and terrifying. Earth was being summoned to answer for crimes against galactic law. Jake had been expecting this day for years. Ever since humanity developed faster than light travel 50 years ago, they had been pushing boundaries that other species preferred to keep intact. Human colonies now existed on dozens of worlds across 12 star systems. Human traders moved through space lanes that had been restricted for centuries. Human scientists asked questions that made ancient civilizations uncomfortable. The door to his office opened with a soft hiss. Captain Lisa Carter walked in, her diplomatic uniform crisp despite having traveled for 3 days straight from the outer colonies. Behind her came Dr. Kevin Hughes, Earth's best expert on alien biology and cultures. Both looked as tired as Jake felt. Lisa dropped a datapad on his desk. The formal charges just came through the diplomatic channels. It's worse than we thought. Jake picked up the pad and read through the long list of accusations. Unauthorized colonization of restricted worlds, development of prohibited military technologies, failure to submit to mandatory genetic compliance testing. The list went on for pages, each charge carrying penalties that ranged from economic sanctions to complete destruction of human civilization. Kevin sat down heavily in one of the chairs across from Jake's desk. They're not just trying to contain us anymore. They want to break us completely. What's the timeline? Jake asked, though he already suspected the answer would be bad. 30 standard days, Lisa replied. We have to appear before the full Senate on Xerion Prime. All human colonies must be abandoned. All military vessels must be surrendered. All off-world human populations must return to Earth and submit to quarantine protocols. Jake set down the datapad and looked out at Earth again. Down there, 8 billion people were going about their daily lives, unaware that their entire future hung in the balance. Children were going to school. Scientists were working on new discoveries. Artists were creating beauty that had never existed before. All of it could end in 30 days. What do we know about the Senate's military capabilities? He asked. Kevin pulled out his own tablet. Their combined fleets number in the thousands of ships. Most member species contribute vessels and crews, according to their planetary population and resource capacity. The Zephyrian Empire alone has over 500 heavy cruisers. The hegemony controls another 300. Even the smaller species have advanced technology that surpasses our best ships. Lisa leaned forward. But there might be cracks in their unity. My sources in the EA diplomatic corps say not everyone supports this action. Some of the younger species remember what it was like when the Senate first contacted them. They had to give up their independence too. That doesn't help us if they still vote to wipe us out, Jake said. He turned away from the window and faced his two advisors. What's the real reason they're doing this now? Humans have been expanding for decades. Why did they wait until now to act? Kevin and Lisa exchanged glances. Kevin spoke first. We think it's because we're getting too close to something they don't want us to find. 3 months ago, Captain Ryan Bell's exploration team discovered traces of an extinct civilization in the Vega system. The archaeological evidence suggests they were eliminated by the Senate about 800 years ago. Eliminated how? Jake asked. Their entire solar system was sterilized, every planet stripped of life, every space station destroyed. It wasn't a war or a natural disaster, it was systematic extermination. Lisa picked up the explanation. We started investigating other systems with similar signatures. What we found suggests the Senate has done this before, many times. Any species that grows too fast or asks too many questions simply disappears from galactic history. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. And now, we're asking too many questions. Exactly. Our scientists have been pushing into areas of research that the Senate claims are forbidden for safety reasons. Our explorers have been finding evidence of these extinct civilizations. Our traders have been making contact with species that the Senate prefers to keep isolated. The office fell silent for several minutes. Jake stared at the datapad, reading through the charges again. Each one represented years of human effort and achievement. Each one represented the dreams and sacrifices of thousands of people who believed they were building a better future among the stars. "What are our options?" he finally asked. Lisa straightened in her chair. "Diplomatically, we can try to negotiate a compromise. Accept some restrictions in exchange for maintaining our existing colonies. Submit to increased oversight in exchange for keeping our independence. It won't be pleasant, but it might keep humanity alive. And militarily," Kevin shook his head. "On paper, we don't stand a chance. Our entire Space Force consists of maybe 200 ships, most of them designed for exploration or cargo transport. We have a dozen actual warships, and they're all based on 50-year-old technology." Jake stood up and walked to the wall display that showed the current positions of all human vessels in space. Tiny dots of light scattered across dozens of star systems, each one representing hundreds or thousands of human lives. "What they don't know is that we've been preparing for this possibility." He touched the display, and the dots changed color. Red for military vessels, blue for civilian ships with defensive capabilities, green for colonies with hidden fortifications. The scattered pattern suddenly looked much more organized. "Project Safeguard has been running for 15 years, Jake continued. "Every human settlement beyond Earth has emergency protocols. Every cargo ship carries defensive weapons. Every scientific station has been built with military applications in mind." Lisa looked surprised. "I didn't know about any of this." "Most people don't. It was kept classified to avoid provoking exactly the situation we're facing now. But the planners knew this day would come eventually." Kevin studied the display. "Even with all that preparation, we're still massively outnumbered." "Numbers aren't everything," Jake replied. "The Senate has been in power for thousands of years. They've grown comfortable with their dominance. They expect other species to submit when threatened. They've never faced an opponent that refused to back down." He turned back to face Lisa and Kevin. "I want you both to prepare for the trip to Zarian Prime. We'll attend their tribunal and hear their demands. But we won't be going there to surrender." "What's the plan?" Lisa asked. Jake smiled for the first time since receiving the morning's transmission. "We're going to give them a choice they've never had to make before. They can either accept humanity as equals in the galactic community, or they can discover what happens when they push a species that refuses to go quietly into extinction." Kevin looked nervous. "And if they choose to fight? Then they'll learn why humans survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and every other catastrophe our planet could throw at us. They'll learn that the biggest mistake any enemy can make is giving humanity time to prepare." Jake walked back to his desk and activated the quantum communication system. "I need to contact President Gonzalez. It's time to let Earth know what we're really facing out here." As the connection established, Jake looked out at Earth one more time. In 30 days, everything would change. The only question was whether humanity would emerge from the coming crisis as free citizens of the galaxy, or whether they would join the long list of species that had simply vanished from galactic history. The Galactic Senate was about to discover that humans were nothing like the species they had faced before. President Maria Gonzalez stood before the emergency session of the United Nations, her hands steady despite the weight of the decision she was about to announce. Representatives from every nation on Earth filled the assembly hall, their faces grave as they waited to hear humanity's response to the Galactic Senate's ultimatum. 3 days had passed since Admiral Morrison's report arrived on Earth. 3 days of heated debates, desperate planning sessions, and careful consideration of options that all seemed to lead to the same conclusion. Humanity would not surrender their future to alien masters. Maria cleared her throat and began to speak. Her words were broadcast simultaneously to every human colony, every space station, and every ship scattered across 12 star systems. This moment would be remembered for generations to come. "Citizens of Earth and the human colonies," she began, We face the greatest challenge in our species' history. The Galactic Senate has demanded that we abandon our homes among the stars and accept permanent imprisonment within our own solar system. They want us to destroy our defenses, surrender our ships, and submit to their authority without question. She paused, letting the gravity of the situation sink in before continuing. Today, I speak for all of humanity when I say that we reject their demands completely. We will not abandon our colonies. We will not surrender our freedom. We will not bow to any power that seeks to deny us our right to exist as equals among the stars. The response was immediate and electric. In the UN Assembly Hall, representatives rose to their feet in thunderous applause. Across human space, colony administrators and ship captains received the message with mixture of fear and fierce pride. Humanity had chosen to fight. On Mars, Colonel Ryan Bell received the President's broadcast while overseeing the evacuation of civilian researchers from the Outer System defense stations. The Red Planet had become the coordination center for Project Safeguard, the secret military preparation that few people knew existed until now. Bell activated his communicator and spoke to the evacuation teams scattered across the Martian colonies. "You heard the President. Change of plans. We're not running anymore. All civilian personnel report to designated safe zones. All military and volunteer defense personnel report to your assigned positions. As of right now, the Sol system is under martial law until this crisis ends." The transformation was remarkable to watch. Mining equipment was converted into weapons platforms. Cargo ships revealed hidden armor plating and defensive systems. Scientific research stations activated military-grade sensors and communication, arrays that had been disguised as civilian equipment for years. Commander Kate Williams supervised the fortification of the asteroid belt mining stations. She had spent 5 years working as a mining engineer on Ceres Station, but her real job had been preparing the asteroid belt for exactly this kind of emergency. Hidden weapons caches were distributed. Civilian workers were trained on defensive systems. The scattered rocks and ice that most people saw as empty space became a carefully planned killing field. "How many ships can we count on?" she asked her second-in-command, Lieutenant Ben Rodriguez. Ben checked his tablet. "Officially, we have 12 actual warships and about 50 vessels with serious defensive capabilities. Unofficially, another 120 civilian ships have been retrofitted with weapons that aren't supposed to exist. Every major asteroid mining platform has been converted to a fortress. Every cargo hauler now carries missiles along with their regular freight." Kate nodded with satisfaction. "The Senate thinks they're dealing with primitive humans who barely managed to reach the stars 50 years ago. They have no idea what we've really been building out here." Meanwhile, on the distant mining colony of Kepler 442b, Administrator Tony Clark faced his own crucial decision. The evacuation order had come through official channels, but his colonists were refusing to leave. These people had spent years building their new world, and they would rather die fighting than abandon everything they had worked for. Tony stood in the colony's main meeting hall, addressing the 3,000 settlers who had made this distant world their home. "I won't lie to you, the Senate's fleet will probably come here eventually. We don't have the military strength to stop them if they're determined to destroy us. But we do have something they don't expect." He activated the holographic display, showing the colony's true layout. What appeared to be a simple mining operation was actually a fortress built into the planet's crust. Underground factories, hidden defensive positions, and supply caches that could sustain the colony for years if necessary. Every building, every tunnel, every piece of equipment we've installed here has been designed with defense in mind. The Senate has dealt with species that surrender when threatened. They've never faced humans who refuse to give up their homes. The key: colonists voted unanimously to stay and fight. While humanity prepared for war, Dr. Linda Foster worked frantically in her laboratory beneath the Rocky Mountains on Earth. Her research into quantum entanglement communications had revealed something that changed everything they thought they knew about the Galactic Senate. "Admiral Morrison needs to see this immediately," she told her research assistant, Dr. Gary Price. The data on her screens showed communication intercepts that had been collected over decades of human space exploration. Hidden within the quantum, signatures were traces of Senate monitoring systems. "They've been watching us since the day we developed faster-than-light travel," Linda explained as she compiled her findings. Every transmission, every scientific discovery, every military development. They've known about Project Safeguard from the beginning. They know exactly how strong we are and how prepared we've become. Gary looked confused. If they know about our preparations, why are they still demanding surrender? They must realize we won't go quietly. Linda's expression grew grim as she uncovered more data. Because they've done this before. Look at these older intercepts, similar patterns from dozens of other species over the past 1,000 years. The Senate doesn't just eliminate civilizations that become too independent. They study them first. They learn their capabilities, their weaknesses, their strategies. Then they strike with overwhelming force. The implications were terrifying. The Senate wasn't making demands they expected humanity to accept. They were gathering final intelligence before launching a war of extermination. Captain Steve Parker commanded the exploration vessel New Horizon, currently investigating ruins in the Altair system. His mission had been to catalog archaeological sites, but what he found changed his understanding of galactic history completely. The ruins showed signs of advanced technology, complex cities, and a thriving civilization that had simply vanished 800 years ago. But these weren't the only ruins Parker's team had discovered. Similar sites existed throughout human-explored space, all showing the same pattern of sudden, complete destruction. "Send this data to Earth immediately," Parker told his communications officer. "Emergency priority, direct to Admiral Morrison and Dr. Hughes. The Senate's ultimatum isn't about containing human expansion. It's about covering up genocide." The evidence was overwhelming. Species after species had developed space travel, established colonies, and begun asking questions about galactic history. Species after species had then disappeared completely, their worlds stripped bare and their achievements erased from official records. Parker realized that humanity had stumbled onto the Senate's greatest secret. For thousands of years, the galactic government had maintained its power not through diplomacy or law, but through systematic elimination of any civilization that might challenge their authority. Back on Earth, President Gonzalez received reports from across human space. The colonists were standing firm. The military preparations were ahead of schedule. Most importantly, the evidence of Senate crimes was mounting into an undeniable case for humanity's moral authority to resist. She called another emergency session, this time including Admiral Morrison, Dr. Foster, and Captain Parker via quantum communication link. "The situation has changed," she announced to the assembled leaders. "This isn't just about human independence anymore. We've discovered evidence that the Senate has committed genocide against dozens of species over the past millennium. We're not just fighting for our survival, we're fighting to expose crimes against the entire galaxy." Admiral Morrison's image flickered on the communication screen. "What are your orders, Madam President?" Maria looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders, then at the data showing the Senate's long history of genocide. The decision was clear. We broadcast everything. Every piece of evidence, every intercepted communication, every archaeological discovery. We make sure every species in the galaxy knows what the Senate has really been doing all these years. Then, we prepare for them to come at us with everything they have. The die was cast. Humanity would not go quietly into extinction like so many species before them. They would fight, and they would make sure the galaxy knew exactly what they were fighting against. The Senate's final mistake was giving humanity time to discover the truth. Admiral Krex of the Hegemony stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the sensor displays with growing confidence. The human solar system lay before his fleet like a ripe fruit ready for picking. 300 of the galaxy's most advanced warships had assembled for this operation, representing the combined military might of dozens of species loyal to the Galactic Senate. The humans had exactly 1 day left on their ultimatum, and their response was exactly what Krex had expected. From a primitive species facing overwhelming odds, every human ship in the outer solar system had fled toward Earth. The colonies on Mars and the asteroid belt appeared to be evacuating in panic. Even their vaunted military preparations seemed to have crumbled in the face of superior galactic power. "Signal from the Senate Fleet Command," reported his communications officer, a tall reptilian creature from the Zephyrian Empire. All vessels are to maintain formation as we advance toward the inner system. The humans appear to be retreating to make a final stand near their homeworld. Krex nodded with satisfaction. As expected, these young species always react the same way when faced with real power. Fear makes them predictable. What Admiral Krex didn't know was that Lieutenant Commander Ben Rodriguez was watching his every move from a hidden observation post built into an asteroid barely a kilometer from the Hegemony flagship. The asteroid had been hollowed out years ago and fitted with the most advanced stealth technology humanity could develop. From the outside, it looked like just another piece of space rock drifting through the void. Ben adjusted his sensors and transmitted a coded burst to Mars Defense Command. Target Alpha is confirmed. Flagship identified. All enemy vessels are proceeding along predicted approach vector. They're taking the bait perfectly. On Mars, Colonel Ryan Bell received the transmission and smiled grimly. The Senate fleet was advancing exactly where humanity wanted them to go. Every step they took brought them deeper into the most carefully prepared ambush in human history. Signal all defense platforms, Bell ordered. Execute plan mousetrap in 30 minutes. All civilian personnel to emergency shelters immediately. The transformation of the inner solar system began in earnest. What had appeared to be a desperate retreat was actually the final phase of humanity's defensive strategy. Ships that seemed to be fleeing were actually moving to predetermined attack positions. Colonies that appeared to be evacuating were actually powering up weapon systems that had been disguised as industrial equipment for decades. Captain Nicole Wright sat in the pilot seat of her stealth fighter, hidden deep within the swirling clouds of Jupiter's great red spot. Around her, 49 other human pilots waited in complete radio silence for the signal to attack. Their ships had been designed specifically for this mission, using technology that the Galactic Senate had declared too dangerous for younger species to possess. "Remember the briefing," Nicole whispered to her squadron over the short-range comm system. "These ships are bigger and more heavily armed than anything we've ever faced, but they're also slower and less maneuverable. Hit them fast, hit them hard, and get out before they can return fire effectively." The Senate fleet continued its advance toward Earth, completely unaware that they were flying into the most sophisticated trap humanity had ever constructed. Admiral Krex studied his tactical displays with growing confidence as the outer planets fell behind his formation. Jupiter loomed ahead, its massive bulk offering perfect cover for the final approach to Earth. "Sensors detect some unusual readings from the asteroid belt," reported his science officer. "Elevated energy signatures from several mining platforms." Krex waved dismissively. "Probably trying to destroy their installations rather than let us capture them intact. It doesn't matter. Once we eliminate their fleet, the rest of their infrastructure will surrender or be destroyed." The fleet passed Jupiter's orbit and entered the asteroid belt, where the real surprise was waiting for them. Administrator Kate Williams had spent 5 years converting every major asteroid mining station into a hidden fortress. Power plants that appeared to be industrial facilities were actually weapon charging systems. Mining lasers had been modified into ship-killing beam weapons. Cargo containers held missiles instead of raw materials. Kate watched the enemy fleet approach from her command center buried deep inside Ceres Station. "All stations report ready. Enemy fleet is entering optimal firing range in 60 seconds. The Senate ships moved through the asteroid belt in perfect formation. Their sensors focused on detecting human ships rather than examining the rocks and mining equipment around them. They had no reason to suspect that every piece of industrial machinery in sight had been designed from the beginning to serve as a weapon when the time came. Admiral Morrison stood in the command center on Luna Base, watching the tactical display as 300 enemy ships moved deeper into his carefully prepared killing field. Everything humanity had worked for over the past 50 years came down to the next few minutes. "Signal from all defense positions," reported his tactical officer. "Everyone is in position and ready to execute." Morrison nodded and opened a channel to every human military unit in the solar system. "This is Admiral Morrison to all human forces. The enemy has entered our home system thinking they're facing a defeated opponent. They're about to learn that humans don't surrender our homes without a fight. Execute Plan Mousetrap. Show them what happens when they threaten Earth." The trap sprung simultaneously across the entire inner solar system. Hidden weapons platforms throughout the asteroid belt opened fire with everything they had. Stealth fighters emerged from concealment inside Jupiter's atmosphere and struck at the rear of the enemy formation. Ships that had appeared to be fleeing suddenly reversed course and attacked from unexpected angles. The Senate fleet, caught completely off guard, tried to respond to attacks coming from every direction at once. Their superior numbers meant nothing when they couldn't tell where the next strike would come from. Their advanced shields and armor were designed to handle conventional attacks, not the exotic weapons humanity had developed in secret. Captain Wright led her squadron out of Jupiter's great red spot like avenging angels emerging from hell itself. Her fighters moved with impossible speed and agility, striking at enemy ships before vanishing back into the swirling clouds. Each attack run disabled or destroyed vessels that were 10 times larger than her tiny fighter. Target the command ships. First, she ordered her pilots, disrupt their communications and coordination. Make them fight as individuals instead of as a fleet. The battle raged for 6 hours, but the outcome was decided in the first 30 minutes. The Senate fleet had expected to face primitive human ships in open combat. Instead, they found themselves fighting an entire solar system that had been converted into a weapon specifically designed to destroy them. Admiral Krex watched in horror as his mighty fleet was torn apart by enemies he couldn't even see properly. His flagship shuddered under the impact of weapons that shouldn't have existed. Emergency alarms screamed throughout the bridge as systems failed one after another. "Signal the retreat," he ordered, his pride forgotten in the face of complete military disaster. "All ships withdraw immediately. We need to get word back to the Senate about what we've encountered here." But retreat was easier ordered than accomplished. The humans had planned their trap well. Escape routes were blocked by hidden minefields. Navigation beacons had been replaced with decoys that led fleeing ships into ambushes. What had seemed like empty space revealed itself to be full of deadly surprises. Of the 300 ships that had entered the Sol system with such confidence, fewer than 50 managed to escape. The rest were either destroyed or captured by human forces. The psychological impact of the defeat would ripple across the galaxy for years to come. Ben Rodriguez emerged from his hidden observation post to survey the battlefield. Debris from Senate ships drifted through space where the mighty fleet had been just hours before. The humans had won their first major victory against galactic authority, but everyone knew this was just the beginning. The Senate would not accept such a humiliating defeat quietly. They would return with everything they had, determined to crush humanity once and for all. But now the galaxy would know that humans could fight back effectively against even the most powerful opponents. Admiral Morrison addressed his forces as rescue operations began for captured enemy survivors. "We've won the first battle, but the war is just beginning. The Senate will come back with everything they have. When they do, we'll be ready for them too." The news of the Sol system defeat spread across the galaxy like wildfire. On Xerion Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Senate, emergency sessions ran day and night as representatives from 200 species tried to understand how their invincible fleet had been destroyed by primitive humans. Senator Valthek of the Zephyrian Empire stood before the assembled delegates, his scaled face showing the rage and humiliation that most of the Senate felt. The holographic display behind him showed the wreckage of what had been the galaxy's most powerful military force just weeks before. "The human infestation has proven more dangerous than we anticipated," Valthek declared, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "They have rejected our mercy and destroyed our fleet with forbidden weapons and cowardly tactics. There can be only one response to such defiance." The vote was swift and unanimous. Total war against humanity. Every member species would contribute ships, weapons, and soldiers to a new armada that would dwarf the previous fleet. This time there would be no negotiations, no ultimatums, and no survivors. The human species would be completely eliminated from the galaxy. But the Senate's plans were already being disrupted by forces they had never expected to face. On the distant world of Corva, hidden in a forgotten corner of the galactic rim, ancient machines began to stir. The Corvan Republic had been declared extinct 3 centuries ago, but the truth was very different. Elder Corvan Thex stood in the underground command center that had kept his people alive through 300 years of hiding. The massive screens around him showed human broadcasts that had been intercepted across the galaxy. Evidence of Senate genocide, proof of systematic elimination of dozens of species, and most importantly, humanity's call for all oppressed peoples to stand together against tyranny. The humans have done what we never dared to do, Thek said to his assembled council. They have exposed the Senate's crimes to the entire galaxy. They have shown that resistance is possible. The decision was difficult but necessary. The Corvan Republic would emerge from hiding and stand with humanity against their common enemy. Their advanced technology, developed in secret over centuries of exile, would give the human alliance a fighting chance against the Senate's overwhelming numbers. Meanwhile, in the depths of Earth's oceans, another ancient species was making similar decisions. The Delphians had been among the first victims of Senate expansion, their aquatic homeworld conquered, and their people scattered across the galaxy as refugees. Most other species believed they had been completely absorbed into the galactic population, but a core of Delphian resistance had survived in the deep ocean trenches of dozens of worlds. Captain Lisa Carter stood on the deck of a research vessel in the Pacific Ocean, watching in amazement as sleek ships rose from the depths around her. The Delphians had been secretly supporting human expansion for decades, providing intelligence and resources while remaining hidden from Senate surveillance. Commander. Reefsinger, the Delphian military leader, communicated through the translation device that Lisa wore. Your species has shown courage that we thought was extinct in the galaxy, the aquatic being said. We pledge our fleets to your cause. Together, we will make the Senate pay for centuries of oppression. The alliance was growing, but so was the enemy response. Admiral Morrison received intelligence reports that painted a grim picture of what humanity was facing. The new Senate armada would consist of over 2,000 ships, 10 times larger than the force that had been defeated at Sol. Even with their new allies, the odds against survival were overwhelming. Dr. Kevin Hughes worked frantically to coordinate with the growing resistance movement. His xenobiology expertise had become crucial for communicating with species that had been hiding from the Senate for centuries. Each new ally brought different technologies, different strategies, and different perspectives on how to fight an enemy that had dominated the galaxy for millennia. The Zephyrians have committed 800 ships, he reported to President Gonzalez during their daily briefing. The hegemony is providing 600 more, but we're also getting support from species we didn't even know existed. The Void Dancers, the Crystal Collective, the Hive Minds of Sector 7, they've all been victims of Senate expansion at some point. President Gonzalez studied the tactical displays that showed friendly and enemy forces throughout the galaxy. The numbers were still heavily against humanity, but the psychological impact of the resistance was already changing the political landscape. What about the Senate member species? Are any of them reconsidering their support? Dr. Hughes nodded. 3 minor species have withdrawn from the war effort. The Peaceful Traders Guild has declared neutrality. Even some of the major powers are questioning whether total genocide is really necessary. The evidence we broadcast about Senate crimes has made a lot of people uncomfortable. While diplomacy and alliance building continued, Colonel Ryan Bell led a desperate mission to the heart of enemy territory. His target was the Senate's central archives on Xerion Prime, where the complete records of their genocidal campaigns were stored. If humanity could capture that information, they would have proof that could turn the entire galaxy against the Senate. Bell's team consisted of 50 of humanity's best Special Forces soldiers, equipped with the most advanced stealth technology available. They infiltrated Xerion Prime aboard a captured Senate transport ship, using forged credentials and disguised appearances to reach the capital city. The Senate archives were a massive complex built into the planet's crust, protected by energy, shields, and automated defense systems. But the designers had never imagined that anyone would be desperate enough to attempt a direct assault on the most heavily defended installation in the galaxy. "Remember, we're not here to fight," Bell told his team as they prepared for insertion. "We're here to steal information and get out alive. The entire war effort depends on what we can learn from those archives." The infiltration took 18 hours of careful movement through security checkpoints and automated patrols. Bell's team used every trick they had learned in decades of military service, combined with intelligence provided by their alien allies who knew the Senate's security procedures. When they finally reached the central data core, what they found exceeded their worst fears. The archives contained records of systematic genocide dating back over 3,000 years. Hundreds of species had been eliminated, not for military threats or territorial disputes, but simply because they had begun to ask questions about galactic history or develop technologies that the Senate preferred to keep restricted. "Download everything," Bell ordered. "Every file, every record, every piece of evidence. The galaxy needs to know exactly what kind of monsters they've been taking orders from." The extraction was more difficult than the infiltration. Senate security forces had detected the intrusion and were converging on the archives. Bell's team fought running battles through the complex corridors, using their superior training and equipment to overcome numerically superior opponents. They escaped with complete records of Senate crimes, but at a terrible cost. Only 23 of the 50 soldiers made it back to the extraction point alive. Colonel Bell was among the casualties, dying in a final firefight that allowed his surviving team members to reach their hidden transport. The intelligence they died for changed everything. When the complete archives were broadcast across the galaxy, the reaction was immediate and explosive. Species that had loyally served the Senate for centuries learned that their own ancestors had been eliminated or enslaved. Worlds that had been told they were joining a peaceful galactic community discovered they were actually supporting a genocidal empire. General Peter Brooks, now in overall command of human military forces, watched the political situation develop from his command center on Mars. "The Senate is losing support faster than they can maintain control," he reported to President Gonzalez. 17 species have withdrawn from their alliance. 23 more have declared neutrality. Some are even considering joining our resistance. But the Senate's core supporters were not backing down. If anything, the revelations about their genocidal history made them more determined to eliminate humanity before the resistance could grow any stronger. The massive armada was still assembling at the galactic core, and it would arrive at human space within months. President Gonzalez addressed the growing alliance of free species from the United Nations building on Earth. Representatives from dozens of worlds watched as she outlined humanity's strategy for the coming battle. "We know the Senate will come at us with everything they have," she said. "They can't afford to let us survive because we represent everything they fear most. The idea that younger species can be equals instead of subjects. The proof that their authority is built on lies and murder. The hope that freedom is possible even for those who have been enslaved for centuries." She paused, looking directly at the camera that would carry her words to every world in the growing alliance. "They expect us to be afraid. They expect us to surrender when faced with overwhelming odds. They have never encountered a species that gets stronger when threatened, that fights harder when the stakes are highest." The final battle began not in human space, but at the ancient Nexus Gate that controlled access to the galactic core. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the battleship Freedom's Call, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history assembled around him. Human ships flew alongside vessels from dozens of species that had emerged from hiding or broken away from Senate control. The enemy fleet was even more massive. Over 1,500 Senate ships had gathered at the galactic core, representing the last loyal forces of an empire that had ruled for thousands of years. But Morrison could see the cracks in their unity. Several allied species had withdrawn their ships at the last moment. Others fought with obvious reluctance, their crews knowing they were supporting a cause built on genocide and lies. "Signal from the Corvin Republic fleet," reported his communications officer. "Elder Thex sends his regards and confirms their ships are ready for battle." Morrison nodded, studying the tactical display that showed the two massive fleets approaching each other across the vast emptiness of space. This would be the largest space battle in recorded galactic history, and its outcome would determine whether freedom or tyranny ruled among the stars. President Gonzalez had insisted on being present for the final confrontation. She stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Earthrise, positioned safely behind the main battle line but close enough to witness humanity's greatest test. Her presence sent a clear message that Earth's leaders were willing to share the risks faced by every human in space. Open a channel to the Senate fleet, she ordered. Even at this final moment, she wanted to give their enemies one last chance to surrender and avoid the massive bloodshed that was about to begin. The response came from Admiral Krex, the same hegemony commander who had survived the disaster at Seoul. His scaled face filled the main screen, showing the hatred and desperation of a warrior who knew his cause was lost but refused to admit defeat. President Gonzalez, Krex said, his voice filled with venom, you have destroyed an order that maintained peace for 3 millennia. Your rebellion has unleashed chaos across the galaxy. We will not allow your species to survive and spread this infection further. Gonzalez met his gaze steadily. The only infection here is the lie that some species deserve freedom while others deserve slavery. Today we end that lie forever. The battle began with a coordinated strike by the Human Alliance against the Senate Fleet's command structure. Captain Nicole, Wright, now promoted to squadron leader, led a force of stealth fighters in a desperate assault on the enemy flagship. Their mission was to disrupt Senate communications and prevent coordinated resistance. Wright's fighters moved through the enemy formation like ghosts, striking at command ships and communication relays before vanishing back into the chaos of battle. Her pilots had learned hard lessons from the Sol system engagement, and they applied that knowledge with deadly precision. Target the Senate command vessel, she ordered over the squadron comm channel. If we can take out their central coordination, their entire fleet will fall apart. But the Senate forces had learned lessons too. Admiral Krex had studied every detail of the Sol system defeat, and his fleet was prepared for human tactics. Hidden weapons platforms emerged from concealment throughout the battlefield. Suicide ships packed with explosives launched themselves at human vessels. The Senate was willing to accept massive casualties if it meant eliminating the human threat. Commander Kate Williams, now commanding the combined Human and Corvin Engineering Corps, worked frantically to keep the Alliance fleet operational. Battle. Damage accumulated faster than her teams could repair it. Ships that had seemed invincible just hours before were being torn apart by weapons that had been designed specifically to counter human technology. We're losing ships faster than we can replace them, she reported to Admiral Morrison. The Senate is throwing everything they have at us. They'd rather destroy half the galaxy than admit they were wrong. Morrison watched the tactical display as red indicators showed Alliance ships being destroyed throughout the battlefield. The Human Alliance was fighting bravely, but they were still outnumbered and outgunned by an enemy that had nothing left to lose. Then the tide began to turn in an unexpected way. Captain Steve Parker, commanding a mixed human and Delphian exploration fleet, had been conducting reconnaissance missions throughout the battle zone. What he discovered changed everything. Admiral Morrison, this is Parker, came the urgent transmission. I've found something you need to see immediately. The Senate isn't just fighting us, they're fighting their own people. Parker's ships had detected massive internal conflicts within the Senate fleet. Entire squadrons were turning their weapons on each other, as species that had been forced into the Alliance finally rebelled against their oppressors. The evidence of Senate genocide that humanity had broadcast was causing the enemy coalition to collapse from within. Signal all Alliance forces, Morrison ordered. Focus fire on Senate command ships. Let their own people handle the rebellion. The strategy worked perfectly. As the Human Alliance concentrated on eliminating Senate leadership, the internal rebellions spread throughout the enemy fleet. Species that had been enslaved for centuries finally had the chance to strike back at their oppressors. The massive Senate armada began tearing itself apart. Dr. Linda Foster, monitoring the battle from her command post on Earth, watched in amazement as her quantum communication intercepts showed the complete breakdown of Senate authority. The entire galactic government is collapsing, she reported to President Gonzalez. Their communication networks are in chaos. Local governors are declaring independence. Even their core worlds are experiencing uprisings. The final phase of the battle lasted only 6 hours, but it felt like an eternity to those who fought it. Admiral Krex made a last desperate attempt to ram his flagship into the Freedom's Call, but his own crew mutinied before the collision could occur. The hegemony forces, learning the truth about their government's crimes, turned their weapons on their commanding officers. When the shooting finally stopped, the battlefield was littered with the wreckage of 2 fleets. But the survivors included representatives from over 100 species, many of whom were breathing free air for the first time in generations. President Gonzalez addressed the assembled fleet commanders from the bridge of the Earthrise. The Galactic Senate is finished. Their authority was built on lies maintained through murder and destroyed by their own victims. But we're not here to become the new oppressors. We're here to build something better. The negotiations that followed took place not in the ruins of the Senate chambers on Zerion Prime, but in open space where every species could participate as equals. Admiral Morrison, now serving as humanity's chief military representative, worked alongside Elder Thex of the Corvin Republic and Commander Reef Singer of the Delphian Resistance to establish the framework for a new galactic government. The Galactic Federation that emerged from these talks was everything the Senate had never been. Every species, regardless of size or technological development, would have an equal voice in galactic affairs. No civilization would be forced to abandon their colonies or submit to genetic compliance testing. Most importantly, the systematic elimination of emerging species was formally banned and classified as the highest crime possible under galactic law. Commander Kate Williams supervised the conversion of the former Senate chambers on Zerion Prime into a memorial for all the species that had been lost over the centuries of Senate rule. The massive hall that had once housed the instruments of oppression now displayed the names and histories of hundreds of extinct civilizations. Dr. Kevin Hughes established the Galactic Species Protection Service, an organization dedicated to helping emerging civilizations develop safely without interference from more advanced species. His first mission was to contact the isolated worlds that the Senate had kept hidden and inform them that they were finally free to join the galactic community. Captain Steve Parker led the first joint exploration mission into the unexplored regions, beyond the old Senate boundaries. His crew included humans, Corvins, Delphians, and representatives from a dozen other species, all working together to discover what wonders lay waiting in the vast emptiness between the stars. The price the Galactic Senate paid for opposing Earth was nothing less than their complete destruction, but the price of their final mistake went far beyond their own downfall. For thousands of years they had maintained order through fear and oppression. Their collapse unleashed a wave of freedom and discovery that would reshape the galaxy for generations to come. President Gonzalez, now serving as the first elected president of the Galactic Federation, stood before the memorial wall on Zerion Prime and read the names of the lost civilizations. Each name represented dreams that had been cut short, potential that had been destroyed, and hope that had been murdered by those who claimed to maintain galactic peace. "We cannot bring back those who were lost," she said to the assembled representatives of the free galaxy. "But we can ensure that their sacrifice was not in vain. We can build a future where every species has the right to reach for the stars and find their own destiny among them."